Good morning, everyone. Thank you once again for joining us. And thank you to our sponsors, the Health Channel, in partnership with Amy and free doctor consultations, and the I Remember Against Genocide bracelet. So thank you. And Senator Book, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. I know that it's been a difficult time. I know that you've been fighting for a lot of issues that I totally agree with you.
Thank you.
But today I was very happy to wake up to see the word something. I think that Matthew McConaghey really did more than anybody of us can ever do
Mhm.
in reaching out to the lawmakers at a federal level. And
Yep,
something is happening.
absolutely. I think that we are in a place and in a time, unfortunately, where gun violence is unfortunately so common. And, in South Florida, we are intimately aware of the lasting effects, not just of everyday gun violence, but mass violence in a school, much like what happened in Uvalde. And I think that something being done is an important step. It's not everything, but there are wonderful pieces in this legislation that we can talk through. Certainly pieces that are left out, but a lot of what this bill has is some things that we did in our Florida law post Marjorie Stoneman Douglas.
Can we go through the things that are there and then go through the things that are missing that you would love to see there? And the other thing is, what happens now in Florida? If this is at a federal level, will Florida adopt everything or?
So here's some of the things that the bill has at this point, that exists. The red flag laws, which is a piece that we have in our law in Florida, and that is that if somebody is in a situation where there's a mental health issue, or somebody recognizes that somebody may not be very safe, that has a firearm, there is a mechanism that you can go to law enforcement to make sure that that weapon is taken away. In the state of Florida, we did have red flag laws put in place after Marjorie Stoneman Douglas. They've actually been used about 5,832 times since that. Law enforcement recognizes that this is a best practice, something that's an important thing that is in the law, and takes very dangerous weapons out of the hands of people who probably shouldn't have them. We in the state of Florida have been pushing, and some of my Democratic colleagues in the Senate and the House have been pushing to expand the red flag laws. There are some people that say that individuals don't want to go to law enforcement necessarily, and so we're looking at expanding the red flag laws so that an individual can go directly to the court to get a weapon taken away from somebody. But that is a piece that is in that bill. There is a special attention and funding surrounding mental health and telehealth, which is vastly important. We know that this is a big piece of the puzzle when it comes to safety. Certainly, we talk about, mental health, and that is an important piece of what's happening here. They have schools, school safety.
Before we go to the schools, I want to ask you something. On the last shooting in Buffalo,
Mhm.
an 18-year-old kid, he did a whole manifest on how he was able to tell the people that were evaluating him for mental health what they wanted to hear. So he managed to go around. He managed to lie to his parents. And everything was based on hate that he found on the internet. So how are we going to prevent that part?
Look, I think that is a very that is a piece in a larger picture conversation surrounding mental health. Look, we in the state of Florida and around the country, mental health is something that certainly I'll stay with the state of Florida that we've not necessarily invested in. We're 49th in the country as it relates to spending for mental health. Obviously, that's a situation that happened there. But again, without a robust infrastructure surrounding mental health, you will find people who are able to slip through the cracks, and that's very clear. But that happens, and I think that part of that is making sure that we destigmatize mental health challenges, and that is an entire a whole
entire conversation for a specialist.
but really I think that is something that is important that be part of the dialogue. And I apologize, I have a 5-year-old that's homesick today, but that is a piece and a part of that conversation, certainly. And I think that the other part of this that's an important part of this bill that we've been talking about for quite some time is closing the so-called boyfriend loophole. And that is, relating to individuals who have access to those weapons and making sure that they're not in the hands of, intimate partner. We know intimate partner violence is a piece of this that's very that happens quite a bit. And so it will deal with that. It's whether an unmarried partner could keep guns if they're found guilty of violence against that dating partner. So that is an important piece that we don't have in our Florida law, but that, safety advocates and domestic violence advocates have been talking about for quite some time. And then we move into the school security resources portion of the bill, which again, in the state of Florida, we've had for quite some time, which is important. There are some things that are left out of this bill that, that we believe and that I believe that are very important. An assault weapons ban. That is a highly political piece to this. At the end, look, I think that those on the other side believe that is a taking of, somebody's right to bear arms. But let's be very, very clear. When the Second Amendment was drafted, this is not the type of weapon that our forefathers were looking about and talking about. This is a weapon of war. Assault weapons, AR-15s, those are weapons of war. And I have spent a good part of my life at this point now in my career looking at and studying the things that happened after Marjory Stoneman Douglas. I've had to watch that footage. I've gone through every single minute of every single piece, and for months and months and now years looking at this issue. I know what a weapon of war used in a school and in a classroom looks like. And it is something that I believe that we are going to need to continue to push for, because they are mass
Destruction.
Or destruction. You talk about, and I don't, when we were dealing with everything that happened after Parkland, you tend to not forget, but they, the most traumatic things that were in your mind, you kind of not forget about them again, but they kind of dip out of focus. But, after Uvalde and talking about parents and listening to parents who have to get dental records to identify their children, I understood what that is, that happened at MSD. And that is a real piece of what this is, that people need to not ignore. These are weapons of mass destruction, weapons of war that shouldn't be in the hands of civilians or anybody. They're very dangerous. And, I'm very unhappy and sad that is a piece that did not make its way into that bill. Also expanded background checks did not make its way into that piece of legislation. And I believe raising the minimum age to purchase a weapon did not make its way into that bill either.
That is inconceivable, because an 18-year-old kid cannot get a beer, but he can buy a weapon of mass destruction.
Correct. And quite frankly, have access to those weapons in some other way and walk into a Walmart or a Dick's Sporting Good and purchase ammunition. That is a very real piece of this reality, that if we're not willing to look at all of the things that actually occur and keeping communities and kids safe, that we're going to miss the mark. And look, I think there's a piece to this that people don't tend to pay attention to, and that's violence that happens every day for kids who aren't getting these marches, community-based violence, that I think that people are starting to talk about and look at. But there are members of my caucus who, represent South Florida, whether it's Senator Pizzo or Senator Jones, who have had pieces of legislation looking at a task force to protect against community-based violence, or a social media bill that would allow law enforcement to monitor social media. And if a minor is in the possession of a weapon and they see that on social media, they can go check that out. We know, and it's a pattern that those weapons are oftentimes brandished on social media. Why would we not want to keep children in our community safe in that way? Those are two pieces of legislation that make complete sense, that have only really had one or two hearings in their time. And so I think that we've done a lot in our state. I'm glad that we have something in terms of a federal piece of legislation, but we still have a long way to go.
There was a rumor on the governor wanting to ask for open carry. That's like even going overboard.
Let's be very, very clear. The incoming Speaker of the House said that open carry is something that they are going to hear during the next legislative session. The governor has made several comments about how open carry is a piece of legislation that he is going to sign. That is both ignorant, stupid, dangerous, and a complete and total, a barbaric idea when you talk about and you're looking at what is happening throughout the country and his own state. Law enforcement does not support open carry. It is a dangerous concept. It does not keep people safe. And so it is beyond the pale to think about a world where GOP and the leadership in the House and the Senate, because of their Republican driven, and this governor wants to allow for open carry. People need to be paying attention and listening to what's happening, and make sure that they exercise their votes come November, because this is a very dangerous and scary time.
Oh, there's shootings every single day in Florida, and with open carry, it's going to be even worse. It's going to triple it.
It will be very dangerous. The law enforcement officers that we have spoken to and have talked to have said basically add 10 to 15, more shootings a day, when this is dangerous. This is, again, you look at what's happening in the tone of our society, our culture, and our community, and it's barbaric.
So let me ask you something else completely different. Moving ahead. Education. Florida doesn't stand up in a very high level on the education system. What are you proposing? What are the changes that you want to bring for education?
I think that we as a state need to double down and invest in education, and really look at the whole child. I think that, we talk about education, we talk about, ABCs, 1, 2, 3s, and making sure that kids are testing the way they're supposed to test. But look, if a child is hungry, if a child is experiencing homelessness or domestic violence in their home, it's not going to matter how exciting a teacher makes that lesson. It's not going to matter, how hard they want to do well. It is almost impossible. And I was that kid. I was a kid who was dealing with my sexual abuse every day. Once 310 came around and I was at home, it didn't matter how exciting the teacher made the Charlotte's Web lesson that day. It was really hard for me to pay attention. It was really hard to focus. And that's happening to children throughout our state, again, every day, throughout the world, quite frankly. And until we look at the whole child and address all of their needs, their socio-emotional needs, making sure that they have something to eat, a safe place to go home to. We're not going to do everything that we can to educate that whole child. And I think that we need to take that holistic approach. The Senate Democrats are actually looking at community schools and how we can create several pilots throughout the state of Florida, because we know that's a better model for how we educate our children and enrich their lives and their families' lives. Because again, it's that Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If they don't have a safe place to go, if they don't have food in their tummies, they're not going to be able to learn.
And it's also teaching them to think critically. It's
Yeah,
another way of teaching, except the SAT scores or what did you get in this course so that the school has a benefit. We cannot continue to do that.
It does not look, we're in a place and in a time where we also too are dealing with the COVID backslide. That's a very real piece of this puzzle too, that I think people tend to forget. We're back to, a lot of everything is back to normal now. We are being careful and vigilant, but we're back to normal. But kids who were doing homeschool for the better part of a year or two, that is a very real piece of this puzzle that people need to realize. And so they're having to play catch up. And we have to completely and totally surround these kids to make sure that they are where they need to be so that they can be everything that they want to be. And that's our responsibility to do. And we need to get to a better place in the educational space.
No, I totally agree with you, because there is also, please take into consideration all those moms that had to quit their jobs. And
Mm-hmm.
it's not that they didn't want to go back into the workforce, because you hear a lot, oh, they don't want to go back to work. And I've heard so many stories of moms that had to take care of their two kids with no child support, no
Mm-hmm.
child care, they're by themselves, and how they cannot go back to work.
It
So
makes
it's
it
having,
makes the workforce and what that looks like is tough and true too. I mean, I tried to homeschool my kids. That lasted a little bit of time, but again, I think that we certainly have a lot of long-term effects that we're only just beginning to see when it comes to the ripple of COVID. And so
to the mental health education and putting resources on that.
absolutely. And think about this too. I mean, you had a lot of kids who, like, for a very big part of their life, only saw like a certain amount of, educators' faces. And there's a lot that really goes into educating the whole child and the mental health of children. And so I think that, it is it's something we definitely need to be aware of and be paying attention to.
But let me move to something different.
Absolutely.
Florida has a huge Hispanic population,
Yes.
huge. How are you reaching the Spanish population? Because we found that, and I call it the cultural mismatch, because for a lot of people, they don't understand that the Spanish is not only Spanish, that Colombians are different from Mexicans, from Argentinians, even in small words.
Yes.
They do not mean the same.
Yeah, I think, look, as we are moving into election time, this is something that we should not just have on our plate and thinking about now. This is something that we should have had on the radar for quite some time. And you're right, not everyone is the same. You cannot simply loop everyone who is Hispanic into one category. There are distinctions amongst groups and cultures and communities, just like with every other group of people in our state and in our communities. And so we have been spending quite a bit of time talking about micro targeting, about having a lot of attention to be made on making sure that all of our materials are in both languages, that they're translated from English to Spanish, that all of our candidates, and we have some incredible candidates, as well as myself, that we're having surrogates if those individuals don't speak Spanish fluently. Certainly that they're taking lessons, but that they're communicating in those languages, that they're communicating with voters, that they're sitting and having different community conversations where people feel that they are part of a conversation. Where they're not being spoken to, where they are a part of that dialogue. And I think that is a piece that's very, very important. And I know that we're working through a lot of that, because again, I think we took people for granted in previous election cycles. I think, again, you looped everyone into one group. That is a dangerous thing to do for any time, anyone, any group, particularly when it's the largest growing population in our state, and you took a group of people for granted. And you cannot do that. And I think that is some of the things that we're doing. I actually had a roundtable and community conversation here in Pembroke Pines with the Hispanic caucus. And a lot of that is, what are the issues that are important to you, whether it's second generation families that are dealing with this, like what does this look like in your community? And they express some frustration that some of the candidates haven't had and don't provide materials in Spanish, and so that there's not multiple languages, and that social media buys aren't, don't have both languages. And so we're working through some of those things, because it's important that everybody be represented and that they feel that they have a piece and a stake in every aspect of what we're doing.
Because it's more analyzing the culture and what their beliefs are based
Absolutely.
on where they come from.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Absolutely.
a whole different ballgame.
100%. And the minute that you start grouping people together and simply saying this group of people over here, that's not how you'd want to be treated. And certainly that's not how you.
Because we are a country of immigrants. Everybody came from somewhere.
Absolutely. And everybody should be represented and be treated with respect. And every group is proud of their culture and their communities. And certain things may resonate with one group over another. Some people, whether it's talking about hope and making sure that you're addressing all of those areas of concern. Look, we saw that with some of the socialism messaging that happened during the last election.
That what you were talking about before on the education side, that we need to make sure that the kids are fed, that it's a holistic, comprehensive education.
Absolutely.
But in some terms, for some people, they're calling it socialism. But it's really not a socialism, because it's making the difference between socialism and communism.
Correct.
Communism is something different.
Yep.
Completely. And we are not in a country that brings that, but that
100.
messaging is making a lot of damage.
And we, as Democrats, have not and did not fight back against some of that messaging the way we could have or should have. And I think it was happening during a COVID time where businesses were closing, people were kind of making some of these decisions, and we didn't do the things that we needed to do to fight back against that narrative, and to have some of those conversations and lean into the discomfort. I think that is something too that is that we're doing differently. I think if there is a piece and a part of this that we've learned anything from, it's bringing people to the table. You can't other everyone. You can't otherize everyone. It can't be the others. You're seeing that with on the other side of the aisle, quite frankly. And we're trying to bring people to the table, to have conversations, to be informed, and to do the things that represent our community. And certainly the Hispanic population is one that is so large, continues to grow, and deserves and needs a seat at the table and be represented.
And my last question, because we're not going to have a lot of time, even though I would love to expand it, is what happens with the abortion laws? Like,
Oh,
what's the state? I know Florida has the 15-week,
mhm.
and I have to say that I had a personal experience. I had no clue I was pregnant. My diagnostic was a lost IUD.
Oh my gosh.
A lost IUD. So there is
Wow.
no, I didn't even know. I was just feeling wrong. I couldn't get out of bed that day. And the what I needed to do for a sonogram at that time, the sonograms were not done
Right.
widely, was a
Yeah.
lost IUD.
My gosh.
And the IUD was stuck in the uterus. So they needed to take it out. And when the moment that they took it out, of course, there was an abortion,
Wow.
but it
Yeah,
was my choice.
that's right.
It was my
Yeah.
choice. I had, and even though they had either it was doing it like that or a C-section to take the IUD out. But it was after the 15 weeks. It was after I had no clue. So what happens then?
So unfortunately, right now we're on SCOTUS watch, and I know this is maybe going to get posted by the middle of the week. It looks as though the Supreme Court is going to be putting out rulings Monday and Wednesday, and we believe that the leaked opinion that we have seen is going to be released this week, and that is a very, very scary state for women and girls throughout the country, certainly in our state. In our state, the governor did sign the bill, will take effect July the 1st, which does have that 15-week abortion ban. It's an all-out ban past that 15 weeks. There is some exemption for health of the mother and imminent death for the fetus. Look, it is a scary, scary time. I never, ever thought that we would be living in a post-Roe world, but we certainly are. There are 13 states across the country that once that opinion is released will completely stop offering abortions in their states. In the state of Florida, which was a haven for some to get and to have access to reproductive health care past 15 weeks, you're going to have to go to North Carolina, which is far. And it's going to be tough and it is scary. And I am very, very concerned that they're not done. And they have made it no secret that, they wanted it to go further. They wanted it to be a 6 or an 8 week ban, which is an all-out ban on abortion. But truly the most barbaric and horrific piece of this whole thing is that there's no exemption for rape, incest, or human trafficking. I'm a survivor of sexual assault myself. Talked a lot about that on the floor, talked more about my experience than I had ever discussed it in the past, because I believed how essential it was that we have that conversation and talk about how painful truly it is to be a survivor and have to make that sort of decision, and that you need more time. And the Republican Party of today scoffed, laughed, made no exemption, and went so far as to say that we are helping survivors of human trafficking by not allowing for them to have access to abortions because they'll no longer be profitable to their pimps. And so we're helping survivors of human trafficking. That is the face of the Republican Party today. And we should make no mistake about where we are.
But wait a second. Who are we helping? If, for example, a girl gets raped, she has to go through 9 months and have a child of a father that's a rapist. Who's going to help her raise the kid? Who's going to help her with the resources? She cannot work. I
Let's
have
be
a friend that
very,
was
let's
thrown
be
out of the house because the father didn't believe her that she was raped. And he threw her out of the house and she had a baby at 15.
The state of Florida is sentencing women to cruel and unusual punishment to carry a baby to term if they choose not to do so. It takes time when you're a survivor of sexual assault to make those decisions, to heal mentally, to heal physically. to make that sort of decision and determination. And again, the state of Florida heard none of it. The GOP heard none of that. They wanted no exemption, and there is no exemption. We are in a very sad, scary place and time in our country. I never thought that my daughter or that I would be living in a time where they would not have complete and in total access to reproductive health care. And we're
Instead of moving forward, we're moving backwards and going back to pre-war times when women
we're
were relegated to what their husband said or their fathers.
absolutely. I mean, look, like I'm allowed to have a bank account. I'm allowed to make decisions for myself. I'm allowed to body autonomy. And in the state of Florida, everything is free except if you're a woman or you're a member of the LGBT community or you're African American. We need to be paying attention to what's actually going on. They passed several bills this year banning books, burning and banning
That was
books.
my next question. Like, what is the no gay bill? I know that it's education, depends on which side you see it. But my question to you is, if a little kid comes in to his classroom and
Hmm?
teachers are the next thing to mothers, we all
Yeah.
know. We look towards our teacher. Teachers changed our lives. So
Hmm.
if there's a kid in school that has two mothers or two fathers, because it is legal
Hmm.
for the same sex marriage in
Hmm.
Florida, but
Yep.
if they're in second grade, teachers
Mhm.
are not allowed to explain to them what that is.
It is not allowed to be a part of classroom instruction, and thereby really and truly completely nullifying the existence of those families in their classroom. It is mean spirited, it is cruel, it is painful, and it is why you saw when entities stood up and then called out the bad, terribly bad, dangerous piece of legislation like Disney did. The governor punished them for taking a stand because of how wrong it was, and did so during that special session when he took away their special taxing district. This is a punitive, um, uh,
I know we're going totally backwards. The other part is that I don't understand is how can you not educate kids on critical race when there is a special thing that you need to teach them about Holocaust? I see it as the same thing. I see
again,
it as two cultures going through a very bad situation, and we need to learn from that.
I always say when you do not learn from your history, you're damned to repeat it. And if you and we constantly want to, and we have allowed, um, I think that the Republicans have sort of just taken this stance that we're completely free, we're a free state, we're doing all of
But
these
is
one.
it free? Is it
Not
free? I'm not allowed to choose if I want to have an abortion. So that's
no,
a
you're
free
if
state.
if no, if you're a company that wants to teach about diverse cultures and communities, you're not allowed to.
Not allowed. So that's the problem. Are we really free?
Not at all. And I think that this is a piece and a part of what we are looking at. And people need to be paying attention again about what's happening. I think that, you know, I am concerned about where we are in our trajectory when they have complete control over the House, the Senate, and the plaza level. There's this prevailing belief and wisdom, and one lawmaker in particular that says we do it because we can. And they do. They can do it because they have the numbers to do it.
That
And
is not right. It's
I,
like, what is, I don't know, we're going, like I said before, we're going backwards.
Absolutely, we are
Moving
going back.
forward, we're not educating our kids. We're not telling them what is a life. A life is not worth it when you cannot make a choice, but then giving a gun to a kid that kills children, is that okay? So that's
No,
the part that I'm puzzled, that I'm totally puzzled. So we really need you to keep
thank you.
fighting for us.
No, thank you. And thank you for the conversation today. And I'll come back anytime you want.
Thank you so much, and I hope that you can get some sense into whether you are Republican or Democrat. It's making sense of all this.
Absolutely. And I will, we'll report back if we make any sense of it. Your
So
future.
everybody, thank you so much
Thanks.
and be safe until next week.